and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Anthony Butler, and he chose to leave the classroom after 18 years in order to become an author, speaker, and founder of the VIP movement, where he has spoken in and served over 500 schools. And I cannot wait to hear about all of his experiences and some of the challenges he's seen as he has traveled the United States speaking to teachers. But before we get there, Anthony, I would love to know what initially made you want to leave the classroom environment in order to branch out to different things?
Well, thank you, Trish, and I'm just excited to speak. But I decided to leave the classroom environment because my calling, more so after 18 years of serving in schools and in the classroom, was to come in my own unique way and support educators with some of the things that are not discussed and focused on disrespect, discipline, underlying reasons for violence. And it wasn't a lot of people dealing with those issues, the lack of support that educators feel. And so I decided to come in and support in that capacity.
Wonderful. And I'm curious, can you tell me more what's behind the title of the VIP movement and what inspired that?
Yeah, VIP, violence, I prevent, and the I is in quotation marks, and it kind of puts onus on the individual to prevent violence in their life. Oftentimes when we deal with disrespect and it turns violent, conflicts turn violent, and you think about before it got there, it manifested outside of the school area, and then the teachers oftentimes are held accountable for things that are out of their control, so to speak. But those underlying reasons for violence were prevalent and striking in the community. And then when it comes in school, so I decided to do more where the individual, like myself, grew up in a very rough and violent background. And I just thought to myself, we have to address the mismanaged hurt that often leads to the violence. And through that hurt, I decided to say, if meaning personally, get help and healing from the hurt in my life, that will prevent violence. And it caused me not to replicate a cycle that is in, many times in our family history, in the community, and it manifests, of course, in schools because it's happening outside of school.
Definitely. And I like that you made the connection between sometimes the smaller things that are allowed to slip turning into big things. Because I do remember in one classroom management book I read a long time ago, it said to sweat the small stuff, which goes against what people normally think. But they said if you make a huge deal out of somebody not being in dress code or somebody, speaking disrespectfully, and kids really see that these little things matter, it makes it a lot less likely to escalate to the point where students are throwing desks and freaking out and having meltdowns and tantrums. And I've heard the same advice for parenting, but it seems like in modern education, it's the complete opposite. They say, don't sweat anything. As a matter of fact, let the kids dress how they want, speak how they want, act how they want. They can turn in homework or they cannot turn in homework. They can show up or they cannot show up. And it seems to me like as we've taken off the reins and let things go wild, we're seeing way more shocking behavior than we ever have in a more widespread way than we've seen before. Have you seen that correlation as you've traveled throughout these different schools?
Yes, and you just think from the educator's perspective, back when I was in the classroom and presently just speaking with many educators who really appreciate someone coming into the classroom and just addressing the issues in front of the live audience that they face all the time. You think of how many times that they're ducking from flying objects, got kicked, got hit, that they are actually in a position where, of course, their heart is to serve and teach. But before it gets to that, those disrespectful and discipline issues keep manifesting over and over again. So, yeah, I've seen it. And the correlation is we have to address the disorder to have order. And if there's a slippage, so to speak, of just allowing students to gradually build up the confidence and momentum on the small things, then they gradually want more and more and more, and it turns into the chaos that is impeding the learning environment in many, many, many settings. And those are the areas that we got to nip in the bud on the small end, and then just begin to, build up that rapport to be able to teach and not deal with that so readily.
Definitely. And I've kind of noticed that throughout all the interviews I've done, the thing that comes up most is administration and principals and instructional coaches, because a lot of people feel like the lack of support and the crazy rules are coming from that direction. So I'm kind of curious, have you gotten a chance to talk a lot to admin, and what kind of things do you hear coming from them, and what kind of disconnect do you see from maybe the administrator's vision versus what the teachers are seeing and experiencing on a daily basis?
Yeah, I get the opportunity to speak with admin often, and that's how, primarily I get into the buildings. And it's like with any profession, you'll have terrific, you'll have typical, and you'll have terrible. And many times when you're dealing with those three tiers in any profession, and then to isolate and focus on the education profession, the terrific ones actually acknowledge that there's a problem. And in order to fix this problem, we have to be able to do something. And the we is all encompassed, meaning like it's going to take a collective effort. And so, before I get to the other two levels, I'll just say the terrific ones first. What they typically do is they seek the advice of the teachers, and they actually respect what the teachers bring to the table. The teachers are with those students the vast majority of the time. So if they're noticing something and they bring a suggestion, a strategy, or this is not working from a school-wide building program, a behavior program that we're implementing, why not try this? The terrific ones are willing to adjust and read the room, and that causes them to garner a certain amount of respect from their teachers. The teachers feel supported because they actually are listening, implementing some of the things, and then backing them up as well. The typical ones, what they typically do is they just go along, peek in and out. They kind of like up and down in terms of their level of support. But the terrible ones, Trish, will blame, they will fault find, they will throw the teacher under the bus, they will make excuses, they will enable, and ultimately they will have the teachers being just tired and angry, and that leads to many of the teachers being burnt out and physically leaving, or they actually stay yet leave emotionally, mentally, and check out. And so that quiet quitting is for real.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of curious, what do you think it would take for things to change? Because I have been accused of being cynical, and that may be true because it just seems like, I started in 2013. I just feel like things have gotten 10 times worse since when I started. But you have been in education much longer, and you've probably seen a lot more schools than I have. So do you think that there's any hope of this trend changing, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I feel hope of the trend changing based on one caveat, so to speak. You have to acknowledge how horrible it is right now across the board, not being negative or pessimistic, but we're in a crisis. And you might hear me say that a couple of times, or maybe more than a couple of times throughout. And the educators who are listening, watching, they will amen that up and down all day. We're in a behavior crisis. And the frustration that I see firsthand, what I experienced, and just listening to the heart of educators, is oftentimes it's not acknowledged, and it's not acknowledged through actions. When you think about it being acknowledged through actions, that's where you'll have your staff professional development focusing on these areas. It wouldn't just be so academic heavy. It will be actually, here are the urgency of the issues that are facing us, and many times those behavior areas, if you just anyone watching this, just think about your last 5 staff development topics, your last 10 staff development topics, your emphasis areas when it comes to actually moving the needle to change the culture and climate of the school. I doubt if 10% have been heavily focused on discipline. I doubt if 10% have been heavily focused on disrespect. I doubt if 10% have been heavily focused on those redirects, what educators are dealing with. So they'll package it. When I say they, I mean administration, leadership. They will say, we need to do more with classroom management. We need to do more with relationship building. We need to do more with actually our procedures, our routines. And any great educator is not against any of that. But the issue is when you have educators that are doing all of those things and they're still feeling the weight of the redirects, the disrespect, the discipline issues, the lack of support, the being just cussed out, the running in and out of the room, the wrecking the classrooms. My hope is it gets better when we fully acknowledge it and quit denying that this is a crisis. And this is the lack of support, discipline, and disrespect issues. You can rank them in any order you want. What I experience and what I hear the most from educators, those are the top three reasons that they leave the profession. They fully know what they're going to be paid, and yes, they need to be paid more. But what I hear over and over again, it's like, why are you leaving? It has to do with those areas of feeling lack of support, disrespect, discipline issues, or you can rank them any order, one through three. Those are the top three areas that I hear over and over and over again. And my hope is trying to be as optimistic as I can be that the changes will occur when it's acknowledged. And then once you acknowledge, you have to change the trajectory and just throw out all of these things that we have accepted as commonplace.
Definitely. And I think the hard thing that I remember from when I was a teacher, if the issues would be acknowledged, it was almost like a double-edged sword because it was immediately put back on the teacher. So it's like, oh, kids are misbehaving. It's because your lesson is boring. Oh, you got cussed out. It's because you didn't build a good relationship. Oh, they threw a desk. Well, why weren't you keeping them so incredibly engaged that it wouldn't even occur to them to throw a desk? And so the only way I've seen misbehavior acknowledged was to immediately put it back on the teacher. And so then I feel like that silently trains teachers that they can never bring up issues to their administrators because they know it's immediately going to boomerang back and smack them in the face. So then I feel like that almost facilitates like a culture of silence and tiptoeing around and just feeling trapped in the classroom with out of control kids because teachers know when they come to admin, it's only going to actually create more work for them. And I discovered that my first couple of years of teaching naively because I didn't have, a traditional education background. I came in through Teach for America, so I didn't really know anything about the school systems or how they operated. So I thought very naively, oh, I'm having some, basic new teacher classroom management issues. I go to my administrator, of course. But I found out quickly they ended up marking me the lowest possible rating when it came to, evaluations and use what I said coming to them for help against me. They would say, oh, well, it looks like we just need to observe you more. Oh, well, it looks like you need to document more. You need to create behavior plans. And I was like, wait a second, like I came to you for help and you just tripled my work and shamed and embarrassed me and put this on my permanent records. And so I'm curious, what do you think a teacher does in that scenario? What can they do? Because I feel like that's probably 80% of the reality of what I hear from teachers when they try to come to admin for help about these very issues.
Yeah, I would say teachers need to keep expressing what's really going on with them. And if admin doesn't respect that or flip it back on them, always and not being disrespectful or anything, is the terrific admin will actually come into that room and model what they are actually wanting to see manifested in the classroom. And respectfully, just to give a strategy in the middle of it, and if any administration personnel leadership is watching this right now, think of how many times if a teacher came to you and said some of the things that Trish laid out, and they offered you to come in their classroom and model it, how often have you taken them up on that challenge? And it's not, a rude or disrespectful way because many times we know that the majority of people in leadership decisions came up through the ranks, being in the classroom. But in terms of going back in, and even if it's a 15-minute, 20-minute mini lesson, to be able to experience what the teachers are going through, to be able to empathize with what they're saying, to be able to, in a span of 15 minutes, see how many times you have to redirect someone. And that student might not necessarily be in the avenue of being disrespectful. You just redirect, no, stop that. We're not doing that. Turn around. And all of that accumulates on the educator. So I think if administrators really want to, in a sense, begin to mark down and document and put it back on the teachers, keep that same energy and go into their classroom and say, let me model this particular lesson. Let me teach this, what I want to see, what I'm evaluating you on, so to speak. I want to model this. And that in itself, twofold, will cause the teacher to respect the admin more because they're willing to come in into the trenches and actually model what they are suggesting. And then it also will call the admin to appreciate how the educators or doing what they can do in the midst of things that are out of their control. When I talk and when I speak to educators now, I say the one thing that I can control to the best of my ability is you're going to be better than when you came in on my watch. And that better is going to cause me to be on you, have high expectations, not to allow you to talk back. And it's just like a journey, so to speak. And when they actually do, if you have an administration that flips it back on you, that's demoralizing because we know the beginning of the school year, all these great speeches are given, all of the energy and excitement. And within 10 days or less, that first week, you start seeing things settle in place. And then educators begin to wonder, pre students, you said that you were going to have my back. Pre students, before they arrived for the first day of school, you said you were going to do this and that. And when it actually occurs, they begin to see what actually is true. And I think those are just some ways that if administration is listening to this, every person, regardless of their title and role in education, I would hope will have the heart that they came into the profession to change lives. So if administration have forgotten what it's like and what it takes and what it actually entails, get back in that classroom, put it on your calendar. Model lessons, teach in classrooms weekly, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Instead of um, criticizing, so to speak, and not necessarily supporting. I think educators will respect that, and it will also call administration to respect what educators are enduring in the midst of trying to meet those benchmarks, those standards, their objectives, help from an academic standpoint as well. Before all of that takes place, you have to have an environment conducive for teaching and learning. And if that environment is not conducive for teaching and learning, step in their shoes and see what's up.
Yeah. And I think sadly, I bet terrific administrators are maybe 20% and 80% probably falls in the other two categories. And so, because I'm just thinking back to my classroom experiences, and I maybe had a couple that were terrific and were willing to model. And I would think sometimes that students would relate to them differently because they would know that they were an administrator or they were just intrigued because it's somebody different, like, oh, who is this? So they're listening and on their better behavior. And there's me as the teacher in the background, like mean mugging them if they're trying to act up, like when the principal is in the room. So I don't feel like too often I've had kids really act up when there was a guest speaker or the principal or even the guidance counselor, they wouldn't really act up. And so I'm wondering if it's not available for the principal to come model, or even if the principal did come model and the kids were being good because it was the principal, where does that leave the rest of the 80% of the teachers? Do you think that there's kind of any like strategies or mindset shifts that they could use if they realize they truly are on their own and going to admin just isn't going to be helpful?
The other 80%, what I've seen and what I've done myself, and I've had a couple of administrators through the years who are those servant leadership type, mopping floors, coming in, doing what they have to do. It wasn't about a title to them. And to this day, I compliment them and let them know that I appreciated that. The other 80%, I've been in some situations where you got to lean on your in-house staff and go to those other educators in the building who are actually getting results in a way, and just ask for support and guidance and have them come in and do informal, just, check this out. What are you seeing? What are you noticing that I can do better? The ability to vent to your colleagues is something that we have to stop criticizing and, in a sense, just putting down. Educators have so much suppressed. And it's just like, the old adage of if you go in the teacher's lounge, you hear educators complaining and all of that type of talk. And sometimes I just think we should be embracing that educators are not quote unquote complaining. They are getting out some of the things that they have suppressed day after day, hour after hour, year after year, and it just accumulates. And so, to that other 80%, do your best to find someone in school, out of school that you trust and be able to talk some of that stuff out of you because mentally, emotionally, physically, we're looking at over 80% of the vast majority of hospital visits are stress related. And there's so much just mismanaged stress that is just sitting there. Because of that, I feel like I'm not supported and I feel like I'm hopeless. And to those educators that I'm speaking to, the hope is do what you can do in that building. And if you can't find anyone in that building, that's why your YouTube channel is so important, Trish. Finding an outlet to where you can get some clarity from other educators, from someone that you can actually get some guidance and instructions. And I just feel like I'm speaking to a few right now who feel like I'm in a place where it's just hopeless for me. I'm not supported. I'm just going through it. Even though we're in the middle of breaks or things like that, when I go back to work, this is what I've been dealing with for years, and I just feel like it's going to be the same old cycle. I just want to encourage some of the educators who are listening. Connect with other people, even if they're not in your building or you can't find that person in your building. Find someone in another building. Find someone in the social media space. Do what you have to do to find someone that you can actually process with, gain strategies from, and ultimately take better care of yourself. That's a passion of mine. Of when I actually go into the schools, it is like my own personal requirement, Trish, is I want to go in the classrooms. I don't want to walk around and point at bulletin boards and look at objectives and be in front of a staff and just speak and say, hey, you need to do this or do that. I want to go into the classrooms and support the educators to address some of those underlying issues that lead to disengagement, disrespect, discipline issues, defiance, conflicts, fights, violence. I want to go in there and support them, and that's what I do. Over 90% of my time in the schools is directly in those classroom settings, working with the students directly, teaching them anger management, teaching them conflict resolution, teaching them the power to understand it. If we're in this room with 25, 30, 35 other students, and you're here for 7 hours a day or 5 days a week, we're sharing this particular room together, and what you do impacts all of us. And so I go in and have those conversations with respect and appropriateness with the students, and give examples of how your behavior is wrecking the entire classroom environment. I just put it in a way that they can understand. And many times when I'm actually presenting with the students, I allow them to come up and say, you know what, I want you to be the presenter. And then I purposely will do the same things that they do to the teachers, to be able to let them know. You see how many times I interrupted you? See how many times I was tapping on the desk when you're trying to give an instruction? And they might laugh at first, but they begin to understand that's me. In their own way, they begin to understand that's me doing this. And it causes them to examine and make some changes.
Definitely. And I'm kind of curious. You've seen, students for many, many decades now. I'm curious how you've seen students change over these past 20 plus years.
Yeah, I seen the change happening with apathy, just not caring, academically not caring, competitiveness to be the smartest one in the class, not caring, disrespect, not caring in terms of calling parents when you coming up through the ranks. It was more of a fear when you say I'm going to call your parent or guardian, and they immediately begin to kind of like, okay, okay, please don't call. And so presently, that quote unquote reverential fear factor is not as prevalent as it used to be, but it is an overflow of the culture. The students, as you know, did not raise themselves. So our society has directly led to the crisis that we're in because education is not valued in society. And I know, from the way that educators are paid, the way educators are viewed, the interactions that educators have with parents, it's not valued, it's not honored. When you're coming up in school sometimes and threatening to cuss out and fight teachers and fight principals as a parent, and there are some great parents out there, but what's happening in these current days in these education streets, it is becoming more normalized for parents to just show up and disregard the entire learning environment and not respect the educators, blame the educators, question the educators, similar to what you were saying is going on in the administration area. So the biggest difference that I've seen is a lack of care, and it's just an overflow from the culture into the classroom, and from the music and all of it. You just look, there are just certain sometimes music videos, and they'll have a classroom setting where people are dancing on desks and just running around, being very disrespectful in school, disrespecting the teacher. and TikTok videos and all of that. And it's becoming more and more normalized. And that's what I'm seeing presently as opposed to how it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, etc.
I 100% agree.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm just curious if a teacher feels like they are kind of on their own, not much support from principals and admin, maybe a little bit of support from their co-teachers, but they're going through the same thing and it really is kind of on them. What are some things that an excellent teacher can do to get through to students without that support system in place? Or do you think it's not really that possible if nobody is supporting the teacher for them to really get through to students like that?
Yeah, it is possible. I've seen it happen with those conditions and scenarios time and time again. But what it's going to take for that teacher is one of the strategies I give, in the limited staff development and also directly with teachers is divide your class in thirds. When you divide your class in thirds, and I talk about the ABC principle, and what the ABC principle is there are students who are automatic, meaning like you can literally walk around the corner and they're going to be doing what they're supposed to do. Then you have students on the other extreme that are actually very, very challenging. And so they're going to kind of go against all the different. So that's the C. And the B are the bubble students in the middle. And typically in every classroom, you will have, you know, 20%, 20%, and then you have 60 in the middle, or it can be 25, 25, 50 in the middle, depending on the nature. But typically you're going to have a small percentage of students on both bookends. And that middle group is the group that can go either direction depending on the day. So what I tell teachers who are not supported, I said literally take your class and put them into three parts. Which students are automatic, they're not perfect, but they're consistently respectful. You're not going to have a bunch of problems out of them. Put them on this particular tier, and list their name in the automatic category. All right, which students do you have the most challenges with? These students, it just seems like you could say something as simple as good morning and it turns into a back and forth. Put them on one end, and then which students are pretty much in the middle. They might vacillate and go back and forth depending on the day. And I tell them to work on that challenging group to move them to that bubble group. And that can be one on ones, that can be soliciting some sort of help outside of the educational structure. I go into a lot of rooms, the first time I'm speaking with a group of students, and I'll ask them who do they respect and why. And what they're doing is giving me intel, and I tell this to the teachers of who you're going to have in your contact system. Because if the students are saying this front end, that this is a person I respect, and you got access to them, use that student's respected person as an ally of yours to come in and help and come alongside you when you're not having those support system. Then I ask the students, questions about what changed. Have you always been like this in school? I get them to admit, when or what happened in their life that caused them to be just routinely disrespectful, being comfortable, being just disrespectful and defiant, and pinpointing was it something going back to the underlying reasons for violence that they have acted out in a way that's not helpful. And all of those strategies combined, I constantly encourage educators to not forget that automatic group. Let them know that I see you, I appreciate you, but then also deal with that bubble group and challenge them to move to the automatic group. It's a process because you have roughly 180 days per year. I know some teachers loop and they have their classes multiple years, but most educators will have their classes, uh, that particular class, 180 days, and they're coming in with so much baggage, so to speak, in addition to the bottom line being you want to improve them academically the way people see success. I see success as we have to improve them behaviorally first, and then the academics will begin to take care of themselves. So I challenge educators to work on that, and then the academic piece will begin to kick in. But it's as anyone who's in education know, been in education, there are no magic wands. It's not going to be you flip the switch on. We have to be strategic. We have to be more of a creative thinker. We have to, in a sense, outthink what has been the normalized results that we've been getting. And that ABC, put your class in thirds. When educators write them down, even though they know it. Like, okay, I know this student, Anthony's on this end, they begin to see this one's here, these this one's here, and this is my core group that's kind of the followers can go either direction. Work with the challenging ones and begin to move them. And then anybody in education know as well is after a while, all of your strategies have been utilized. That challenging group needs to be in another setting, you know. So and I might pause and see if you wanted to add anything, but I'll get to we have to do something with that challenging group beyond just like what's been occurring. And I'll speak on that after I hear from you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just think that at least the way I felt when I was in the classroom, like I can still picture the faces of the challenging group. And I felt like because there wasn't a ton of support from parents or admin or instructional coaches, it just felt like it took so much energy. Like I like to imagine it as trying to hold beach balls underwater, like the amount of strength that it takes. And if you've got like 3 or 4 beach balls that you're trying to hold down, underwater per
Yeah.
class period, it's just so draining. And I would feel like I could be moderately successful with all of my different skills and tools. But what ended up happening to me is it completely wiped me out and it took the joy out of teaching because I did feel like I had to, in every class where I had really difficult kids, especially when I taught middle school, it would just be like, I'm having to spend so much energy trying to like have these kids behave whatever it took that I missed a lot of the joy from seeing success maybe with the kids that were doing well and even paying attention to the kids that were in the middle. And so it's hard because I feel like that's all that can really be done if you're in a situation without support, if you're not really in a place where you can send the difficult kids out easily. It's just you got to do what you got to do. But for me, that just blasted the joy of teaching. And I think it honestly frustrated the other kids because I think after a while they start to think, wow, the kids that are behaving the worst are getting the most attention from the teacher. And I think sometimes that's what kids want anyway. So then there's nothing to stop them from thinking maybe I need to act up and be silly so that I could get some of that attention and one-on-one time and conversations too. And so at the end of the day, I just ended up leaving because I was feeling like my job was almost being a small group counselor for like the naughty kids. And like what I came to do as a teacher, which was like teach, inspire, cause kids to grow, I almost felt like I didn't have the energy to make all those things happen. And so my just fear and concern with the direction that education is going is that teachers are put in this place to be like mini caseworkers for like, even if it's just 3 or 4 kids a class. I mean, that takes so much work that they're just so burned out for like the enrichment and just the other kids that it destroys their joy and productivity. At least that's how it felt for me.
Yeah, it's common. It's
Mhm.
common. Your experiences, what you just laid out, is what I see and hear and witness live and in real time over and over again. And the exact verbiage that you use in terms of the joy is just being just like stifled.
Mhm.
And I keep going back to that challenging group has to have a different level of accountability. Because I agree with you, Trish. It has to be when you don't have support. I just go to the creative thinking, and I speak often about how that is a life skill that we have to really, really start activating more. Is that's when you start bringing in people from your network or going outside of the realms. I've been called into school sometime outside of a reward system, so to speak, to deal with that challenging group. I'll have them all in one room. The ISS in school suspension room that many are beginning to outdate and call something else, but in reality, that challenging group, you have to have, and I'm gonna call it, based off what it is to me. When students have earned their way out of the regular classroom setting and they're placed in that in-school suspension environment or whatever someone wants to call it today, in-school suspension is what I call it, the ISS room. That room has to be a place that the student feels in terms of this is not a reward. I'm not just going to have my head down. This room is a place I don't want to be in. And once I get in this room, I have been in settings to where you have to earn your seat back in the regular classroom. So, for example, if you are in the ISS room, I'll give you 1 hour back in your regular setting where you have to be on point, where you can gain an extra hour for the next day, an extra 2 hours. And eventually, when you go back and forth between those two environments, it causes you to think twice and harder about before I disrespect and create chaos, that I don't want to be in this ISS, in school suspension room, because of my behavior. And then whoever is leading that session, you have to be able to facilitate the root reasons why students are. And it has to be something, again, the students have to feel the weight of it. Many times we don't want to take away, quote unquote, privileges that students want and things of that nature. When you're in that room, the privilege that you're going to have is getting that behavior together so you can actually enjoy the teaching and learning environment and contribute to it, where you're not causing educators and your classmates to lose their joy. One of the other areas too that it's not talked about often, and the educators can relate to this and amen me so to speak, is you look in the eyes. I come in the classroom and you see the students who are automatic and they are the respectful ones, and they might not necessarily say anything, but their body language is speaking that they are just tired of this as much as the teachers are. Even though they're not teaching, those students who are respectful, who want to come to school to learn, it's not funny anymore. They're still the same age with their peers, and but you look in their eyes and you'll just see just exhilaration when that student is removed from the room, excitement because now they're not going to be interrupted from their learning process. And those are the conversations I have with the automatic group. Say, I know it's frustrating for you, and I'll say it in front of the class. And like, there are students in this room, they're frustrated, they're tired, they're angry because their learning time is being hijacked by the behavior that is not the greatest. And I said, the students won't necessarily say it, but I'm going to speak for them because, again, 70% of our communication is nonverbal. Just read the room and you'll see those automatic students. They're fed up with it as well. But we have to do more in those settings where the students who are misbehaving, feeling it, and to the administrators and superintendents watching this, think about those spaces where you remove students out of the classroom, your ISS room environment, whatever you want to call it. What is going on in that room from an underlying, you're going to feel this decision that you made, and then also coupled with how can I help you, and then how can I support the teachers to where they're not doing so much when the students get put out of classrooms. So I just think we have to do more in those areas.
Definitely. And I'm kind of curious, when you go into classrooms for the first time and meet with students, do you find that they are pretty well behaved just because you're like a new face and they're curious? Or do you have kids really testing your boundaries and trying to push back and act out? And if or when that does happen, what do you do as somebody that doesn't have a ton of time to build relationships? You just have to be there on stage, so to speak, and running the room at the moment. What kind of tricks or tools or tips do you have for teachers to kind of nip behavior in the bud as it's happening?
Yeah, I use time as my number one power source in the sense. I say, look, I have 30 minutes in your classroom, and out of those 30 minutes, I tell them front end, I am not going to spend a lot of time redirecting and doing this or doing that. I tell them up front. Uh, yes, I experience some of the same behaviors that the teachers feel and experience, but it's not as much because, as you said prior, many times you coming in as a guest speaker and they want to be on best behavior. There have been times where they just wanted to act how they normally act, and I had to address that. I have presented and known for I'm gonna finish my presentation, but before I go to my next spot, I respectfully ask the teachers, who is this child's parent or guardian, and I'll call the house myself. And I'll tell the parent, hey, I'm a guest speaker. I don't know anything other than I was invited into your room and your son or daughter was awful. They were being very disrespectful. On the flip end, I do it for the ones who are being respectful as well, just to kind of, the ones who stand out in a great way, bring that point to light. But I typically give the students an agenda. Either I'll have it written out or on board, and it breaks down every single minute that I'm in that room. And I will tell them front end, I only have 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever amount of time that I have on the front end. I will tell them I am not going to spend 10 minutes of this session telling you to stop it, turn around, quit yelling across the room. That's how I typically get their attention immediately. I let them know how much time I have, and then I get to work with what I have to do. And my sessions are typically share the stage, so to speak. So I will start off, say if it's 30 minutes, 5 minutes intro, 5 minutes closing. The other 20 minutes, the students are going to be actively doing something with me. I'll call them up and have them co-present. Or if I'm talking about anger management, I'll call them up for a quick improv where we're actually acting out what this looks like. And it's just like eyes are directly on me because I use actual situations that occur in the classroom. And if the teacher gives me any pre-conversation, I ask the teachers, what are you dealing with the most? And we'll do a quick scene on a redirect scene or someone talking back or having to get in the last word. And then after that little quick improv session, I will talk about this is what your teacher is dealing with while the teacher is in the room watching this. So it's like twofold. The students are being able to see it in a quote, and to them, because they're actually presenting with me in their eyes, which they are. I'm acting out. Sometimes I say, you be the teacher, I'll be the student, and I'll do the behavior that the teacher is struggling with, and that causes them in a sense to see it from both sides. And so I don't have typically a lot of issues because of the things that I just laid out. I put the time up front, I write it on the board, I put my agenda, I either type it out, give it to them as I'm introducing myself, or I'll just write it quickly on the board. This is what we're doing. And I check off each area as it actually happens. I said the welcome is done. Now we're into the actual meat of what we're going to do. Okay, this is your time to do small group collaborations. This is your time to share. And that's how I typically keep it moving. And I, move around the room, speak. Many things that I did when I was in the day-to-day teaching environment. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it to be able to help the teachers deal with those issues that are not necessarily talked about. Conflict resolution, talking about how to de-escalate situations, decision making. The behavior issues, the anger, the time management when it comes to if an educator gives you an assignment in class and you have 20 minutes to get it done, what are you doing for those 20 minutes? So I talk directly about those issues with the students and the educators present.
Great. I like that. I think those are some good practical tools that teachers can use in a day to day basis. And I'm kind of curious. I feel like I've picked a lot on like administrators or systems, but I'm curious, what are some things that teachers end up doing wrong that ends up hurting them or biting them in the end, that especially if there's new teachers watching, that they could kind of avoid these pitfalls?
I think one of the things that they do wrong and don't realize the impact of it is the beginning of the year, the beginning of the class. The tone has to be set, and you look at it from the beginning of the school year. Typically the first 2 weeks sets the tone for the entire year, and you have to keep watering those environments. What I mentioned earlier about procedures, routines, expectations, they cannot deviate. And the beginning of the year, once you lay it out, you have to stick with it and be an enforcer. When there's a problem, it has to be a common sense consequence consistently over and over again. So sometimes teachers, whether they're new or seasoned teachers alike, uh, they don't handle the beginning well. The beginning of class, if you walk into an environment that's already chaotic, it's going to gradually get worse and worse throughout the entire time. So how you start the class, and once you start it on point, you got to make sure it's on point the entire duration of whether you're doing a block of time or whatever block of time. And then I'll just say again, share the stage. It cannot be just the educator being the only one conveying information. I routinely will call students up in front of the classroom with me. It keeps them on their toes. And, of course, there are times where I won't make someone come up, but I'll just say, come on, join me right quick. It only takes 10 seconds and just kind of keep it moving to where the students are buying into whatever that we are learning and they're a part of the process. But more than anything else, when you start the class, start the school year, and you lay down those expectations, those procedures, the things that are done, that you actually show the students how to do it, and the routines, what the students do automatically without your supervision, those have to be on point, coupled with your 3 to 5 rules, expectations that are not just some copy and paste type of deal. It has to be significant to what you're attempting to accomplish, and then carrying consequences. We do a lot of rewards based in systems, and students are, they just actually expect to get so much for quote unquote good behavior. But I said the greatest thing you're going to get is an education. Anything else is icing on the cake. But when there is a problem, here's a carrying consequence that you're going to miss this. And those carrying consequences can range from, once you know your students well enough, you know what hits them. You know, often when I talk, and even today, I'll go into the classrooms, and if there's like, if I'm there all day and I'm in multiple classes, I'll find out if it's a gym class or recess, and I'll just pop up with recess. And many times, if a student's cutting up, and because they like to play basketball, or I'll be all-time quarterback, or just interact with them on that level, I just say, you know, I can't do whatever. I encourage the teacher, like, they need to sit out some time. You know, those are the types of things, they feel it on that front. Or if you got a class party or class something planned, or just whatever it is that the students feel that they want to be a part of. You know, myself and other educators, we were big on having certain days where students had tournaments playing Madden and stuff like that, and they just love the video games. But we set it up as an incentive, and if a student did not earn that right, they were left out. They didn't even get to stay in the room and watch their peers, you know, hoop and holler about who's the best on the video game. But again, all of it was structured and laid out ahead of time. But it was just like, it was something the students really wanted to do. And when they knew that they didn't get the opportunity to experience that because of their behavior, they made it to the next one, because I want to be a part of this, because they felt it. You know, many times we give consequences that the students don't feel. Going back to the ISS in school suspension room, if they want to go there and they feel like it's a hangout spot and they missing class and they're just doing whatever, head down, listening to music, hats on, and all of that, that's not felt. That's just something that they want to do, and they will act out just to be put in that setting. So schools need to examine those areas, if it's something that the students are actually feeling to the point to where they want to cause intrinsic change.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I feel like I shout from the rooftops the need for just basic consequences. But what I've found in all five buildings I worked in, it was like, for whatever reason, everyone from parents to admin to instructional coaches to professional development leaders were starting to say, no, you can't do that. You can't take away recess. You can't take away parties. You can't take away field trips. You can't, ISS was kind of like the party room. And that's where I honestly came to the conclusion, like, this job is starting to be impossible. The minute you take away the ability for teachers to give consequences, I just feel like a teacher's job is pretty much like, that's the nail in the coffin. Because it was even getting to the point where if I had something like Class Dojo, they would complain if they had too many lost points because it was too negative. When I would try writing names on the board, they're like, no, you're publicly shaming the student. There used to be, star walls where you would keep track of homework and test scores. And they kind of started doing away with that, saying you're publicly shaming. So literally anything that would make a student even slightly uncomfortable, it was just like all the adults surrounding, except for the teacher, would be like, no, you can't possibly hurt the child that way. And so that's when I kind of just threw in the towel. I was like, okay, then I can't teach then. I can't do anything if you're tying my hands. And sadly, that's the kind of thing that I'm starting to see more and more in schools, because sometimes just for fun, I imagine myself like, if I had to go back to teaching right now, I know exactly what would happen. I would come in, I would have my rules, I would have my expectations, I would try my best to do buy-in. But the minute kids start testing and breaking those rules, which they will do because they're kids, they
Right.
would quickly find out there's nothing I could do except for repeat myself or maybe have a discussion with them. And that might be effective for some kids that are really motivated by not wanting to feel like the teacher's upset with them. But I feel like that's kind of a smaller and smaller subset of kids, especially when, you get older, like upper elementary, middle school, high school, forget it. It's like the teacher is now no longer the cool person to, to impress. They're all about impressing their peers. And so I personally hit the wall where it's like, if I have something as simple, like every teacher's rule is usually, if I'm talking, you're not talking. And I feel like that's normally teachers' number one problem is kids having side conversations, calling out, talking over people. But it's just like, what do you do? Because in the olden days, you could say, I have a clip chart. Every time you talk out of turn, I'm moving it down. But then people started to get upset with that. And like in the olden days, once you got to the bottom, maybe you were missing time for recess. Or the same thing with homework. It was like, if you don't turn in your homework, you're not going to recess. But I got told at all the elementary schools I worked at, oh, you're not allowed to do that. You can't hold kids out for not turning in assignments. So it just became this thing where it was like all the pressure was on me. But, basically it's like I felt like I had to be some kind of miraculous unicorn where I just like somehow like motivated and inspired kids to do the right thing by the sheer wonder of my personality and smile. And that just simply doesn't work for a lot of kids. They could care less how nice I am. They could care less how many like, come to Jesus conversations I have with them. They're just like, I don't care. You're not going to do anything. I'm going to do what I want. And so that's just the impossible wall that I feel like myself and so many educators have found themselves in, because it's just like if there's no consequences, there's no leverage, unless for some miraculous reason they just like you so much they want to make you happy. But I feel like maybe out of all the teachers, maybe 10% of teachers are like that. The kids just love them so much they'll do whatever they say. But I don't think that that's the average teacher. So I don't know. That's where I always get stuck, when I'm trying to give people advice. And for a lot of us, we're like, nah, we're getting out of here. We quit the profession because you've taken away all of our ability to have even basic rules, structures, and consequences. So I know that's a lot, but I'm just curious about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate your channel and the work you do and compliment you often, because that's real talk. I mean, when we talk about real talk 101, that is the reality. That is the elephant in the room, that in many staff development sessions and meetings, the educators won't have the freedom to articulate what you just said without feeling like this is going to come back on me. So I want to start off by acknowledging and respecting the fact that that is the real in these education streets that are going on in schools across the nation. And so my response is I'm going to go straight to the headquarters of various school districts, the leadership, the superintendents, the superintendent cabinets, before you even get to the principals, those who are in a sense, if you're looking at the hierarchy of why principals feel the pressure to put all of this on their staff. I'm going to start off with my response to what Trish just said to that particular setting. What Trish said is the reality of what is going on, and it's not abnormal. This is the norm in many settings across the nation. And when you think about that is the norm, and if you are a decision maker in headquarters, just let that soak in and saturate it, even if you have to go back and listen to it 2 or 3 times. That's the norm. To hear it from someone who left the education field and many others who are leaving for the exact same reasons, to all of you in the headquarters of district offices around the nation and around the world, this is worldwide. That's the norm. And then once you begin to start examining what was said, start thinking about not only like, yeah, we get it, we get it. No, we don't get it because our actions are not demonstrating that we get it. We have to start doing more in those areas that are laid out where students feel empowered and actually they feel like that they are being rewarded to be disrespectful. The whole system needs to change to the state level, federal level. It's like a pipeline going down where all of these decision makers who are thinking about education and they're not having respect on their radar, disrespect, discipline issues on their radar as they make decisions, that has to become more of the norm. And to those principals who are being feeling like, well, I have to do this because my quote unquote supervisor told me that this is an emphasis area, somebody needs to stand with 10 toes down and start saying enough is enough, because this is what is driving the crime rate outside of schools. This is what's driving the homicides, the violence. This is what's driving all of the behaviors that are manifesting from a societal damaging way. It starts with an allowance, and we're just letting this skate when the students are very young. And so naturally, it gets worse and worse and worse, and it manifests in society as they get older. We have to start doing more with our policies, with our decisions, where we're allocating funds. You think about there are certain schools with all of these behavior issues, they're sharing counselors, don't have a counselor, might have a social worker split between, a building of 500, might have one social worker per 500 kids. And because the money is being put so much in academics, which any great educator is not against academics, it's just the issues that are causing academics to be challenging are not being addressed. are not being addressed. And so, to answer your question, I'm just in my own way starting a grassroots movement where we just having these common sense conversations about what can we do when the students feel comfortable. Grab that mic at halftime. I said this often, and I'll say it on this platform, Trish. When you have all the parents there for whatever, you know, events, assembly, football game, grab that mic at halftime. Grab that mic in the middle of the performance and say, we are in a crisis with behavior. It might not be the most popular thing to say, but it's going to be the truthful thing to say, and let the parents know we need your support. And directly and with boldness and clarity, speak with them and say, we need you to support us outside of school, backing us up, not coming up. Give examples of the things that are occurring, coming up and blaming the teachers, threatening the teachers, telling your student that you're going to come up and fight the teachers, and the teachers, and the students repeating what their parents said. Well, my mama said she's going to come up here, or my daddy said he's going to do this. I will meet you in the parking lot. All of that nonsense needs to be addressed. And we have to quit being so quote unquote politically correct in this crisis that we're in education, where we shouldn't say that to parents. Everything I say is with respect and tactfulness, but it's going to be direct and speaking to the heart of the issues that educators are dealing with. They need better parent support. There are great parents, and I want to keep saying that over and over again. But when you start looking at the percentages of the ones who are actually supporting the educators in the classroom, backing them up, something else we have to do is get rid of this free 99 syndrome, as I call it, to where, yes, we grew up in extreme poverty and needed help. But you look at some of the advertising and the hook and the marketing that school districts are doing, you get free this, free this, free this, free this, free this. And so many things are free that it causes a certain level of entitlement and enablement to where when students get free lunches, sometimes they're throwing a whole plate in the trash can. They're getting free school supplies. They're breaking pencils. They're getting free this and free that. And I'm not against helping people because we've been helped. And so that's not my heart. If you're hearing this, like, well, Anthony said this. But what I'm saying is the emphasis that we are creating is a culture where if everything is free all the time, people don't value it if they have to at least put a dollar in or something to, like, I help pay for this. I just think we need to look at the whole system because we created this monster. The culture, the music, the way that school is ran, so to speak, the beating up teachers in staff meetings and breathing fire on them when they dare to speak the truth, the gaslighting them, flipping it back on them and saying, this is your fault, why this class is out of order. I'm not going to come in and do this. I'm going to put you on job target. All of that, it just needs to stop. And it stops with we have to change it from the top down. To any superintendent, principal, someone in leadership position, you know what it's like because you've been in the classroom. And I, again, just felt compelled to just speak this to you. You know what it's like. And sometimes you can't be so far removed from the classroom that you forget what it's like that educators are going through right now. Is far worse now than it was with some of those who have been out of the classroom for multiple years, every 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. I mean, since the pandemic, it's just a whole different level. Okay, once things got settled, and they still have not really been settled since the pandemic, it's just a whole different layer of complacency, a whole different layer of apathy, a whole different layer of comfortability, being disrespectful, defiant, and then the educators are burnt out and they're tired and they're frustrated and angry primarily because they're being blamed. They're not being supported. They'll tell you what support looks like, feels like, and sounds like, and they're not necessarily, in the sense just being a victim. They need some support, and the parents needed support. Colleagues in house, there are a lot of staff drama. I mean, we haven't talked a lot about that. There are some educators, there's so many clicks. I said, don't take the clickbait, the CLIQUE bait, because there's so many clicks in schools where people are trying to get in good graces of the principal and they're running back, telling on educators, so to speak. And that is very childish and peer pressure like that. You think that phase of life is over with, but that's happening in many staff settings as well. It's it's multifaceted, but to the educators who are feeling what you just said prior to me just speaking on all of this, it's the truth. And we have to start we have to throw out so many things that are normalized now and begin to change up the whole system. And that starts with real conversations like this, because the educators will let you know what's not working, what is ridiculous. And if they feel the freedom, I get so many conversations where they just said, I just thank you for having someone to be able to share this with, and I don't feel like I'm going to be punished for it. And they will share what is the problem, and they will offer strategies and insights and solutions about this is how we begin to address this. But it's hard to address it when the top down decisions from the federal, state, local level, the school boards, you're not off the hook. uh, some of these policies are awful from the school board level, and that has to be addressed as well. Uh, Find out who's on the school board and what are they, in a sense, putting out there that educators got to abide by. Many educators are frustrated about many of those policies, ranging from students can come to school and do absolutely nothing and still get a 40 or 50. And those are just a quick example. I can go on and on, but I'll pause and just hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for everything you said. I totally agree. And I'm just kind of curious. Well, two questions that I like to ask people. One is, what do you wish if you could speak to the community, admin, basically anybody that's not in a teacher's role? What do you wish that they knew and understood about a teacher's job?
Yeah, one of the things that I wish that they knew and understood about a teacher's job is you see the hours when they're with your student, the before and after is just overwhelming. The prep time, the commute, the paperwork, to having all of these great plans in place and not being able to implement them after you spend hours setting them up. And then also the out of pocket expenses. And I can do a word play on that all day, every day. The out of pocket of what they're spending, to be able to supplement and fund some of the things in their room, and then also the out of pocket experiences from a slang standpoint of what they have to deal with when students are just being very disrespectful. And the community will understand that the community birthed the students, and I'm going from the home to the neighborhoods, and then they come to school, and the community has to do more to help with that problem. So I would like for the community and those who don't serve in schools to truly understand, if you could see the day in the life of a teacher, their schedule, how much money they're spending, the excitement they feel when they feel like they have a great lesson, and then how demoralizing it is that they didn't even get the lesson off because of the behavior. And just to see the care, many times the concerns that the teachers have for students, the vicarious trauma that they experience based off what the students are bringing to the classroom, and they're pouring and pouring and pouring to be able to help. And then also to see how the toll of all of this affects their own family. Many educators are so drained from what they deal with in the classroom and in the school professional area that they are, in a sense, neglecting their own spouses or whoever they're in a relationship with, their own kids. And that causes a lot of, remorse and a lot of just regret on their part, because they are spending all of this time and they're being hit on both ends, professionally and personally.
Amen to that. Yeah. And I remember the distinct thought going through my head. And I don't know, some people might think I'm a little bit mean for saying this, but right around the time where I was like, I absolutely have to quit and I can't even finish the year, I remember thinking, like, I am pouring out so much. And they aren't even treating me as nice as they would treat a sub. Like,
Yeah.
they're doing less work for me than they would a sub. So I thought to myself, if they're going to treat me like I'm just a substitute teacher and not do the work like I'm a substitute teacher, well, then I guess they get a substitute teacher for the rest of the year. Because I truly was like, I really felt like I was just pouring out all of this effort and all of this energy and just completely depleting all of my strength, only for to see like no crop, so to speak, no harvest, so to speak. I just felt like I was seeing nothing. It was 2021, which was a pandemic year, and like literally over 90% of my students had turned in nothing. Yet I knew that they were going to pass, knew that nothing was going to happen to them, even for them having like a zero. And I just, remembered this, the meetings of us getting berated about why aren't the standardized test scores higher? Why aren't the data cycles higher? And I just was like, this is such insanity. Like, I am doing everything I can, and these kids have to do absolutely nothing. I'm still in trouble. They're having the time of their life. Like, I quit. I'm done. And I just, yeah, I totally agree. I think so many people realize that the equation is not working. It's like, yeah, they're getting a paycheck, but you can get a paycheck from being a manager at Target and get as much as you get for like an early teacher's salary. So it's like, if all we wanted was a paycheck, we would pick a job that's so much easier. Most of us get into teaching because we really thrive, like you said, on seeing the light bulbs come on seeing students excited about the subject that we've chosen to invest in. And it's like, when you get nothing but disrespect, misbehavior, not even the dignity of attempting to log in to submit assignment, it's just like, not the good teachers are not going to want to deal with that. And unfortunately, the ones that get left, I think they do have to end up quitting to preserve their sanity and to preserve their spirit, because it's like, it is just far too painful to pour out and pour out and pour out and get not only nothing but often disrespect and blame in return. So I totally agree with all of that. And the final question I like to ask people is, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything in education, what would you change?
Well, I would start with kind of like a theme of what I've been saying. I would start with those who make decisions, making it a requirement that they have to spend a set amount of time in a classroom. Like sometimes where you're trying to keep your status present or current, you have to put in hours. I would make it to where those who are decision makers, federal, state, local level, they have to spend X amount of hours in a classroom, and in order for them to remain current in whatever title or role that they're in, they have to actually complete those hours each year. And I just think that will lead to a whole change in policy if they were in that position overall. And the parent support and engagement, that's just like 1B, has to be more a level of accountability from that standpoint. Those would be my two major uh, wands, so to speak.
I love that. And I'm sure we could keep talking forever, but it's already in over an hour. So I would love for you to just tell the audience, where can they find you? You could tell us about any books or projects you're working on, anything you want to tell us about to get connected with you.
Yeah, and I'll send you the link as well so you can put it in the description. But violenceIprevent.com is the best way to find me. It's my website, violenceIprevent.com. I taught for 18 years in school, 6 years. I started as a paraprofessional, 12 years certified in the classroom. And then in 2010, 2011 was my last year in the day to day classroom. And in 2013, I started the VIP movement, Violence I Prevent, where I go back in the rooms and go directly in the classroom and support educators addressing the underlying reasons for violence. And I'm an author as well, wrote several books. And my latest book is called FUMING, Educators Are Tired and Angry. And that's on Amazon. FUMING, Educators Are Tired and Angry. And what I've been doing more so officially, I've been doing it unofficially for years, but more official now is I'm doing fuming forums where I have educators come and they, in a sense, share what's causing them to be tired and angry. And we offer a place where they can just share it and then also give some refreshing strategies and insights. So it's designed for educators and it's from educators, but I give them a platform to fume about what is it that is causing them to be tired and angry, but then also giving them some refreshing strategies. And again, that's based off my book, Fuming, Educators Are Tired and Angry. And the book is on the website. And if anything you need from me, Trish, I'll send that to you, link or whatever, so that can be in the description as well. But my final word is just my heart goes out to all the great educators who have actually had to leave the profession because some of the things that we talked about, myself included, when I left, I didn't leave education. I left the system and I'm coming back in my own way. So I want to encourage the educators, not being just like all over the board with what I'm saying. You have not officially left education. You left the setting. But I guarantee in your day to day life, you're still educating, you're still encouraging, you're still doing the core foundational principles of what great educators do, which is passing on knowledge and your wisdom to help generations, do legacy work. And so don't feel bad or beat yourself up if you had to leave. Sometimes we leave, but it's not like that we quit on education per se. We just decided to do it in a different setting. And for me personally, and other people, and I want to compliment you, as Trish, is you're still doing great work. It's just in a different setting, and you have the freedom to do it in such a way that will bless many educators. And that's great creative thinking on all of our parts.
Well, thank you, Anthony Butler. This has been a fantastic interview. And audience, thank you so much for watching. If you ever want to interview with me, you can email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. And we'll see you guys later. Bye for now.
Thank you all.